Imagine waking up tomorrow to find $2,000 in your bank account. No strings attached, no applications to fill out, no hoops to jump through. Just cold, hard cash deposited directly into your account, courtesy of the federal government. Sound too good to be true? Well, if Donald Trump gets his way, this could become reality for millions of Americans faster than you might think. The promise is simple, almost shockingly simple. $2,000 for every American citizen. Not a loan, not a tax credit you have to wait months to receive. Actual money, delivered quickly, designed to provide immediate relief to families struggling with the highest cost of living in generations. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just campaign rhetoric or empty promises. Trump has laid out a specific framework for how this would work, and the implications are staggering. We're talking about one of the largest direct cash transfers in American history, dwarfing even the stimulus checks that went out during the pandemic. Let's break down what we know. The proposal calls for $2,000 per adult American citizen, with additional payments for children in qualifying families. Do the math. For a family of 4, that's potentially $8,000 hitting their bank account in a matter of weeks. For a single parent with 2 kids, $6,000. The total cost? Estimates range from $400 to $500 billion, depending on exactly who qualifies and how the program is structured. That's roughly 10% of the entire federal budget, delivered in one massive wave of spending. Now, you might be wondering where this money comes from. Trump's team has outlined several funding mechanisms. First, reallocating unused funds from previous COVID relief packages. Billions of dollars remain unspent from pandemic-era programs, sitting in government accounts while Americans struggle with inflation. Second, cutting what Trump calls wasteful federal spending, particularly foreign aid and what his advisors describe as bureaucratic bloat. Third, and this is where it gets controversial, tapping into tariff revenues from his proposed universal baseline tariff on all imports. Trump has repeatedly claimed that foreign countries pay these tariffs, though economists widely agree that import taxes are ultimately paid by American consumers. Still, the revenue would be substantial, potentially generating hundreds of billions annually. But the real question isn't where the money comes from. The real question is what happens when you inject $500 billion directly into the American economy virtually overnight. Let's game this out. Scenario 1. Immediate economic boom. Families use the money to pay down crushing credit card debt that's been accumulating at 20% interest rates. They catch up on rent and mortgage payments, preventing evictions and foreclosures. They fix their cars, buy new appliances, take their kids to the dentist for the first time in years. Consumer spending surges, businesses see record sales, employment rises to meet demand, and the economy enters a rapid expansion phase. Tax revenues increase as economic activity accelerates, partially offsetting the initial cost of the program. This is the optimistic vision, the one Trump's team promotes enthusiastically. Scenario 2. Inflation spirals out of control. Suddenly, everyone has an extra $2,000 burning a hole in their pocket. Demand for goods and services spikes dramatically while supply remains constant. Basic economics tells us what happens next. Prices rise. Your landlord knows you just got $2,000, so guess what happens to rent? Grocery stores see lines around the block, so prices creep up. Car dealers, restaurants, retailers, everyone adjusts their pricing to capture this new spending power. Within months, that $2,000 buys significantly less than it would have before the program launched. Low and middle income families, the very people the program aimed to help, find themselves worse off as their savings and regular income lose purchasing power. The Federal Reserve, already battling inflation, is forced to raise interest rates even higher, potentially triggering a recession. Scenario 3, and perhaps the most likely, something in between. Some Americans use the money wisely, paying down debt and building emergency savings. Others spend it immediately on necessities they've been delaying. Some businesses raise prices, but competition keeps increases in check. Inflation ticks up moderately, but doesn't explode. The economy gets a short-term boost, followed by a gradual return to baseline. Life goes on, $2,000 richer for having participated in this unprecedented experiment in economic policy. Here's what makes this different from previous stimulus programs. The pandemic checks were emergency measures, justified by lockdowns and economic collapse. This proposal comes at a time when unemployment is near historic lows, the stock market is hitting record highs, and GDP growth remains positive. Critics argue we're essentially printing money to solve a political problem, not an economic one. Supporters counter that official statistics mask real suffering, that inflation has devastated working families, and that traditional metrics don't capture the lived reality of Americans struggling to afford basic necessities. The political calculus is fascinating. Trump positions this as a direct rebuke of the Washington establishment, bypassing complex tax codes and welfare bureaucracies to put money directly in people's hands. It's populism distilled to its purest form. No means testing, no complicated eligibility requirements. If you're an American citizen, you get the money, period. Democrats find themselves in an awkward position. How you oppose giving Americans $2,000, but supporting it means endorsing massive deficit spending and potentially stoking inflation, contradicting their own recent warnings about fiscal responsibility. Some progressive Democrats actually like the concept, viewing it as a step toward universal basic income, while moderates worry about the economic consequences and the precedent it sets. Then there's the constitutional question. Can a president unilaterally authorize such spending? Almost certainly not. This would require congressional approval, meaning negotiations, compromises, and potentially months of political theater. Trump's team insists they have a path forward through budget reconciliation, the same process used to pass major tax and spending bills with simple majority votes. But even that requires unity within Republican ranks, and not all GOP senators are sold on flooding the economy with freshly printed currency. Let's talk about who benefits most. $2,000 means vastly different things depending on your circumstances. For a family living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by, this could be transformative. Caught up bills, a security deposit on a better apartment, car repairs that have been delayed for months. For a comfortable middle-class family, it's a nice bonus. Maybe it funds a vacation or goes into a college savings account. For wealthy Americans, it's a rounding error, money that likely gets invested or sits unused. Critics point out that giving equal amounts to everyone, regardless of need, is inefficient. Why send checks to millionaires? Trump's response is simple. Keeping it universal eliminates bureaucracy and ensures rapid deployment. Start means testing, and you're back to government agencies processing applications while people wait for help. The timing couldn't be more strategic. Trump wants this implemented quickly, ideally within his first 100 days if he returns to office. The goal is clear: create an immediate, tangible benefit that Americans can see and feel, cementing loyalty and providing momentum for the rest of his agenda. It's Economics 101 meets Political Strategy 401. Make people happy fast, and they'll give you political capital to spend on everything else. International implications deserve consideration too. If America implements a program like this, other nations will be watching closely. Does it spark a global trend toward direct cash transfers? Do other countries feel pressure to match the stimulus to remain competitive? Or does it trigger concerns about American fiscal stability, leading to dollar weakness and capital flight? Currency markets hate uncertainty, and this would be uncertain territory par excellence. There's also the question of precedent. Once you've given every American $2,000, what stops the next crisis from demanding another round and another? Does this become the new normal, with citizens expecting regular cash infusions whenever times get tough? Some economists warn about moral hazard, the idea that bailing people out repeatedly encourages risky behavior and reduces incentives for savings and prudent financial management. Others argue that in an economy where wages haven't kept pace with productivity for decades, direct transfers simply correct an imbalance. Small businesses have mixed feelings. On one hand, customers with extra cash means more sales. On the other hand, if it triggers inflation or leads to higher interest rates, the costs of inventory, rent, and borrowing all increase. Some business owners also worry about labor markets. Will workers quit jobs they hate because they have a financial cushion? Will it become harder to fill positions? Or will increased consumer spending create so much demand that businesses need to hire aggressively, pushing wages up naturally? The mechanics of distribution present their own challenges. The IRS would likely handle payments, using tax return data to identify recipients and direct deposit information to transfer funds. But millions of Americans don't have bank accounts. Others have outdated information on file. Fraudsters would certainly try to exploit the system, claiming payments for dead relatives or fictional dependents. Setting up safeguards takes time, but moving too slowly defeats the purpose. Trump's team promises a system that prioritizes speed over perfection, accepting that some fraud and waste is inevitable in exchange for rapid relief. What about future generations? That $500 billion gets added to the national debt, which now exceeds $34 trillion. Interest payments on that debt consume an ever-growing share of the federal budget, money that can't be spent on infrastructure, education, or defense. We're essentially borrowing from our children and grandchildren to fund consumption today. Is that responsible? Is it fair? Or is it necessary medicine for an economy that's left too many people behind? Perhaps the most intriguing aspect is what this reveals about American politics in the 2020s. Both parties have largely abandoned concerns about deficits and debt when it serves their purposes. Republicans cut taxes dramatically while increasing military spending. Democrats propose trillions in new social programs. Both sides send out stimulus checks when elections loom. The era of fiscal conservatism appears dead, replaced by competing visions of how to spend money we don't have. Trump's $2,000 promise is simply the logical endpoint of this trend: direct, unfiltered vote buying, stripped of any pretense of complex policy justification. So, will it happen? That depends on the election, on congressional mathematics, on economic conditions, and on 1,000 variables we can't predict. But the fact that we're even discussing it seriously tells you something profound about where American politics has gone and where it might be heading. The barriers between campaign promises and actual policy, between fiscal responsibility and political expediency, between careful economic management and bold gestures, all of those barriers are crumbling. Whether that's exciting or terrifying probably depends on your economic philosophy and your bank balance. But one thing is certain: if those deposits hit, America will never be quite the same. $2,000 times 160 million adults equals a gamble of historic proportions, and we're all along for the ride, whether we like it or not.